philosophical questions. What is the ultimate purpose of human activity? Aristotle concluded that the ultimate purpose of human activity is happiness. Did he scientifically test this assertion? Not that we know of, though in fairness, they didn't have large epidemiological cohorts, randomized trials, complex statistical forecasts, functional magnetic resonance imaging, or genomic and epigenetic assays in 300 BC. Yogi Berra once said that you can observe a lot by just watching, and Aristotle watched more than his share. He was a student of Plato and a teacher of Alexander the Great. Let's stop here just for a second. Aristotle taught Alexander the Great. Picture yourself with Alexander as he's wondering whether to invade, let's say India. Aristotle observed virtues and vices that we couldn't imagine in our modern era, and maintained that unless we were a slave, we choose for ourselves the kind of life we live. In psychology, the capacity for human beings to make these kinds of choices and to impose those choices on the world is called agency. Though this seems obvious to most people today, that individuals have at least some agency, it was quite different in Aristotle's time, when it was the norm to make sacrifices to the gods to influence one's fate. In the Iliad, Homer's ancient epic poem, an archer loses a shooting competition not because of his own performance, but because he failed to sacrifice 100 lambs to the god Apollo, who apparently holds grudges. Another archer does make a sacrifice of 100 lambs to Apollo and wins the contest. Thousands of years later, this tactic would come to be known as working the refs. Consider for a moment how this mindset might influence your behavior in the modern era. Before you drive to work, you might toss into your Costco sacrificial fire pit a package of frozen chicken breasts to assure a safe commute. If your fate was determined by the gods, you might not care that much about actually driving safely, a point made vividly clear when I was a child in Sunday school and our minister would drive us in his car at over 90 miles per hour. If God wants us to die, we'll die. If he wants us to live, it doesn't matter how I drive. We, in the back seat, of course, loved our minister's approach to life and to driving. Our parents, oddly, did not. He didn't stay around long. Without a sense of personal agency, people throughout history would sacrifice anything they could round up, including at times their own children. If you live in a chaotic environment, you still try to maintain control, even if it's not by your personal agency. Aristotle's approach to living changed the way people thought about cause and effect, heralding in Western civilization, the beginning of human agency. If we do have agency, Aristotle considered, we should be thoughtful, using the gift of reason in choosing what to be in our lives. One of the most delightfully dark statements of our own agency is from the writer Kurt Vonnegut, who said that, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." Aristotle thought that, with a few exceptions, we decide what we become. Back on the plane, I exclaimed, "You're Lawrence Krauss." Since Lawrence Krauss already knew that he was Lawrence Krauss, he seemed unsurprised by this statement. He did, however, seem somewhat concerned that the last person in the world he'd want to have sitting next to him had just sat down next to him. He acknowledged that he was indeed Lawrence Krauss. I opened my computer, clicked to my slide of him, and said, "I'm afraid I have a bone to pick with you, Lawrence Krauss. You may want to take another seat before we take off." Two kinds of happiness. So if the gods, fate, luck, or chance aren't solely responsible for our outcomes, if we indeed have human agency, where do we turn to make the right decisions? Socrates, the Athenian street philosopher, famously said that the unexamined life is not worth living. As he was teaching others to examine their lives, Socrates would often stop in the middle of a conversation, leaving briefly to consult his inner self. When he returned, he would speak with the confidence that he was conveying truth. Sculptors of his era would occasionally hide a golden figurine inside terracotta busts they made of the Greek gods. One of Socrates' students likened him to one of these statues. On the outside, he was a bald, pot-bellied man. His inner self, however, was godlike, and Socrates was considered by his students, including Plato, to be in touch with his true